Now that you know more about the Cutting Edge program and how to enroll, we will further review the foundational concept of active managerial control. Please review the following training video that will detail the 3 principles of active managerial control: developing policy, training staff, and verifying results.
We talk about foodborne illness. Here's some numbers from the CDC. They estimate that this is data from 2011. 48 million people get sick. 128,000 are hospitalized. 3,000 die of foodborne illness every year, or at least in this year of 2011. Now, talking about active managerial control, some of the definitions: the purposeful incorporation of specific actions or procedures by industry management into the operation of your business to attain control over foodborne illness risk factors. It's actively going out there and saying, I know what they are and I'm going to take control of them. It embodies a preventative rather than reactive approach to food safety. Having active managerial control includes having procedures in place for controlling identified foodborne illness risk factors through a continuous system of monitoring and verification. So we're going to talk about, I said, policy, training, and verification. Policy is a defined set of actions set in place based on developed policies to minimize food safety risks. Written ideally would be good, but some people use verbal policies. We'll talk about training, which is the conveyance of food safety and procedure knowledge to the appropriate staff. We need to have that. And then verification is a periodic validation of food safety procedures, which are key. You guys have this on your guys' PowerPoint presentation, but some examples of active managerial control: having a certified manager, having training, manager training, keeping records are some of the things. I won't read all through those. The benefits of having active managerial control: it increases employee awareness and participation in food safety. Employee turnover is less, we've found. Consistency in your food preparation, we have policies. It increases profit and definitely better health inspections. It's less stressful and more protection of public health at the end of the day is what we're doing. So I want to talk a little bit about policy. Let me just go back. Let's start with policy. So it says, what is a policy? A policy is basically saying, how do we get from point A to point B, C, D, and E? There could be more or less steps in a policy, but basically it's how to get us through certain steps. And it's very important that if I'm coming up with a policy for cooking chicken, that somewhere in my policy there's going to be a step that says that chicken is going to get to 165 degrees for 15 seconds to eliminate what? The bacteria, which is in this case salmonella. So somewhere in there we have to find out what is the most important step or steps and make sure that those are achieved, right? And then also, when we develop policies, it's important that we have key people at the table. And what I mean by that is, from experience, you know, I used to sit together and we used to talk as a family on a Sunday and say, when we go back to the restaurant on Monday, we need to change this policy because it's not working. Well, let's figure it out. And we would sit there and figure it out. We'd go back to work on Monday and tell our staff, hey guys, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to do it this way. What do you think the reaction was from our staff? Here come the owners again. I have no idea what they're doing, right? And they're changing it up again. Making stuff up, exactly. But it wasn't until we started saying, well, wait a second, if we're going to talk about cooling, I need the person in charge of the kitchen, I need maybe a line cook or two, and I need myself at the table, and I'd identify who are those key people that need to be at the table. Why would it be important to bring them to the table? Because they're doing it every day? Why else? Because you can't do it every day. Any other reasons? It builds consistency. And then now whose plan is it? Is it my plan or our plan? And you get buy-in as well. And they know the kitchen, like I said, better than the owner or the manager. They know what's going on. They'll tell you if that's going to work or if that's not going to work. And they'll have good suggestions. So it's key that when we're developing policies that we make sure that we have the key players at the table. That's really important. Also, when we talk about policies, you need to understand that policies usually don't work the first time. Okay? Don't let that scare you. Sometimes we can sit together at a table and come up with a policy even when we have the key players. We go back into the kitchen and it doesn't work. A lot of people get scared and they stop there and they just go, let's go back to what we used to do. Instead of saying, no, wait a second, we just need to massage this just a little bit, work it, and it'll, eventually it will work. And so don't let it scare you if it doesn't work the first time. And then another thing that's really key when it comes to developing policies is that we have corrective actions. You don't know how many times I've gone into establishment and said, so I'm finding this let's say these beans that you're reheating out of your walk-in cooler. I found them at 80 degrees. You started cooling them yesterday. Did you check them last night? Yeah, we checked them for cooling. Did you finish checking them? No, I had to go home. What do we do with these beans? Well, doesn't say in my policy, there's nothing in my policy that says what I should do. And if an employee does not have the corrective actions in their policy, and if they're not trained to it, then they're just going to keep moving it along because they don't know what to do. So it's important that in our policies that we have corrective actions. The policies that we should have, or that we can have, policies for receiving, for storage, preparation, cooking, cooling, reheating, hot holding, the assembly of our food and the service of our food are just a few. And policies basically just answer the following questions: the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's all you're telling your staff and anybody who's following a policy. It's just answering those questions so that people can follow those. Training. Once we have policies, we have to train off of those policies. We need to let staff know, in this establishment, this is how we're going to do things. If you're a line cook, if you're a dishwasher, if you're a bus boy, whatever it is that we're going to do, we have to train off of our policy. So let me ask you, when's the last time you guys did training in your establishment? Think about that. When's the last time I did a training in my establishment? What did you train on? How long did it take you? Was it effective? Did you train off of a policy? Think about that. How often do we train? How often do we train our staff? Anyone? We should have them every day. I think it's key that we have them every day. And I'm not talking about shut down the restaurant and put everybody out, and it's going to take all day and it's going to take tons of time. I'll give you an example of a training just really quick. But it's important that we do training. It says up there, don't waste your time writing policies if you're not going to train on them. If they're just sitting in your office in a nice briefcase or back in a nice cabinet, they do you no good. So it's important that we know what our policies are and that we train off of them. When I say it doesn't have to take all day, I'll give you a training that we can do really quick for hand washing. Somebody can time me and let me know how long it takes. But I'll do just a quick training. We're going to start a new shift. I just have all of you guys come in, and right before our shift, we're going to do a quick little training on hand washing. All right, guys. So welcome for today. I want to talk a little bit about hand washing and the importance. I want to make sure that when we come into our establishment that we're washing our hands. Why? Because most of the bacteria that we have on our hands can get transferred into food. From the food, it can go to the customer, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So we need to make sure that we keep our hands clean. When you come into work, one of the first things I want you to do is go to the hand sink. Wash my hands for how many seconds? At least 20 seconds. 15 of those seconds should be scrubbing. In between your fingers, back of the hands, back of the thumbs. But 15, if it takes you longer than 20 seconds, I'm okay, but at least 15 seconds of scrubbing. Make sure you're doing it at the hand sink. We have 3 compartment sinks, prep sinks. The only sink you should be using for washing your hands is the hand sink. And make sure that there's soap and paper towels at all times and hot and cold water. If you're the last one to take the last paper towel or soap, don't just walk away. Make sure that you come over and either get somebody or go refill it. Also, if you see a leak underneath the sink or one of the faucets not working, please let us know. I also want to make sure that you're washing your hands every time you change tasks. That means if you're on the cook line and you have to go back to the walk-in cooler and move things around, before you come back onto that cook line, you should wash your hands. okay? If you're changing out gloves, I want to make sure that if they're dirty and contaminated, your hands are contaminated, that you go wash your hands. Also, in this establishment, we have the double hand washing rule when it comes to using the restroom. That means if you use the restroom, you wash your hands in the restroom, and then you come out and immediately find the first sink, hand sink, and wash your hands again. So it's double hand washing at the hand sink, okay? Any questions? How long did that take? Maybe 5 minutes? Less than 5 minutes, did you say? So little trainings like that we can give our staff are key, and they have to be ongoing. And it keeps things up here. And it's important that we do that. People, I've learned through experience that employees for the most part want to do what's right, and they want to do their job. They want to come to work and know what they have to do. And sometimes, for me, personally, the frustrating thing was I wasn't teaching, and so therefore they weren't doing, and then I would get frustrated. How come you're not doing what you should be doing? And then finally, verification. I said, don't waste your time writing policies if you're not going to train. I would say, don't waste your time training if you're not going to follow up on your training. And I learned that the hard way too. I was doing a training, kind of like the training that we did for hand washing. And it wasn't about, maybe half an hour later, I'm in the kitchen. I see somebody going from task to task, completely dirty hands and not washing their hands. And it was mostly out of frustration, but I said, sir, could you please go to the hand sink and wash your hands? As soon as I did that, that person went to go wash her hands. What do you think happened after he went to go wash his hands? What did everybody else start to do? You mean you really meant that? And everybody else started to follow. So I said, I see how this works. So if I train and don't say anything for the rest of the day, then that training probably is likely not going to stick. But if I follow up on it, then people know that I really meant it. Then they're more likely to actually follow that training. And so it's important that we follow up. When we do training on our policies, we're training them to get from A to whatever however many steps we have in our policy, right? We're saying we want you to go, based on our policy, we want you to get from this step to this step, and that's how we're going to do things in this restaurant, right? Let's say it's A to D. Now you get your employee and train them, and what's your employee going to do? Okay, well, thanks for the training, and they're going to start doing the training, but guess what happens over time? What happens to that employee? And eventually, over time, they start missing the mark if there's no verification. And where do we end up? Over here. Did we get to where we wanted to go? We didn't. So you tell me, where is follow-up best served? Earlier or later? After training. The earlier we do verification and follow-up, the easier it is to get that person back on track, to get them to where we want them to go. If we forget about it or let it go too long, then it's almost like we have to start all over again and retrain. And so it's important that we do verification sooner rather than later. I have up there that says, make sure that you check the checker. What that means is sometimes we put somebody in charge in a kitchen, let's say. I'm the owner. I'm going to put my kitchen manager in charge of cooling. My kitchen manager is not going to do the cooling. He's going to probably delegate that to someone. But we're going to say, okay, here's how we're going to do cooling. We have logs that we're going to fill out. And my kitchen manager is going to make sure that those logs get filled out by the person that he assigns that to. But every now and then, checking the checker means that every now and then, I need to go in and make sure that I hold my kitchen manager's feet to the fire. Just like he's supposed to hold that employee, whoever's doing the cooling's feet to the fire, I need to come in every now and then and also make sure that my kitchen manager knows that I'm that interested that I'm going to go in and check. These 3 steps, when we talk about policy, training, and verification, when we see these things happening ongoing in an establishment, it's been our experience that most of the establishments that have this do a lot better during their inspections. So the question that you have to be asking yourself is, how am I doing? How's my establishment doing? When we talk about this stuff in active managerial control, that's what active managerial control is, guys. Preventative rather than reactive. It's having policies, making sure that I'm training on those policies, and then doing some follow-up. So in my establishment, is active managerial control non-existent? Is it underdeveloped? Is it basic? Is it well developed? Or am I even being proactive? We have given you and provided some tools and resources. The point is not to teach you a lot of things that you don't know, but to maybe bring some of the things that are key and important to the forefront of your minds when it comes to food safety. I can promise you that if you do create policies and you train on those policies and you do follow-up, that you will have success. You will have more success than you're having now.